3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Project Egg Show, where you can come and get inspired by entrepreneurs from around the world who are changing this beautiful planet that we live on. Now, today, we have the honor of speaking with Trish Saemann, the co-founder of two companies, not one, but two, GoBeyond SEO, a digital marketing firm, and Creative Clarity, a business coaching and entrepreneurial education company. She's also a graduate of the internationally recognized Goldman Sachs 10KSB program at Babson College. In addition, Trish has done some amazing things and has very impressive accolades that I could not possibly capture in this brief introduction. So without any further ado, please help me welcome Trish. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for the glowing introduction. It's humbling to hear. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for carving out the time to do this. I really do appreciate it.
I'm happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
All right. So let's jump right in.
Yep.
No more funny business. Well,
no more
funny business.
I'm very serious now. Going to break it down.
What is your story?
What is my story? Gosh. I think the most fun story is how we founded GoBeyond. It was in 2009. And for those of you who remember or who were in business at the time, it was a little froggy. It was a little scary. We were in the throes of the recession. And my husband and I decided that we wanted to start a business, partly because it looked like we were going to lose our job. So I, at the time, was working for CBS. I was in sales, doing advertising sales. And he was working at another place, Cox, I believe, where he was doing some sales too, but he's not really a natural salesperson. So we decided to start a couple of baby e-commerce websites where we were selling an ebook that my husband had written. We were selling bikes, and not like motorcycles. We were selling like bikes with two wheels, and chimeneas too, which I actually had to explain to somebody what a chimenea was not too long ago. It's kind of like a fire pit, but with a long chimney. Now, we are not chimenea enthusiasts. We are not biking enthusiasts, but we saw that there were holes in the market through doing some market research. And we knew that if we built these little websites and did some SEO to them, that we could actually, be a player in the market. So in the throes of the recession, I was pregnant with my second child, and we decided to, kind of launch these little businesses. And they really did well. We were kind of surprised at how well they did. But they didn't do so well that they would replace an income. And lo and behold, lots of different people were getting fired from CBS. Now, I was in sales, and most business people will tell you typically don't let the salespeople go because they're the ones generating income. But I did ask my boss, and I still owe him a debt of gratitude. Can you please let me go? I'm going to go on maternity leave soon. Anyway, at that stage, when you're in sales, you get things called chargebacks. If your leads and your clients don't close their business, if they don't pay their bill, your commission gets charged back. So I went from making a very handsome salary to something that wouldn't even cover childcare for my older son and my dry cleaning. So when they let me go, I, got to stay home and be pregnant and not have my older child in childcare. And then we had a few people in our neighborhood who also started losing their jobs. So the only real income we had was my unemployment at the time and these little baby websites that were generating about $3,000 a month, which is great for a little tiny website, but really not anywhere close to covering the monthly nut for two adults and then a child on the way, and then a little guy at 3 at the time. So my neighbors started losing their jobs, and they all worked for like Bank of America. And here, what was going to be Wells Fargo at the time was Wachovia. So I'm looking around my neighborhood, and all of these people don't have jobs, and they're, doing very well as far as their career is concerned, but all of a sudden dropped off a cliff. So several of them reached out and said, that thing you did with the bike shop where you built that little website and then you sold bikes. Can you do that for me? I said, yeah, no problem. And again, I'm pregnant, or at part of this time also nursing my newly born baby. And I said, yeah, we'll build your little website. So we did. We did it for about 4 or 5 people. Then I think it was the fifth or sixth person approached us and said, can you do that for me? I said, we can for a fee, $400, $800, I don't know how much to charge. So we kind of jumped into it head first, never having run a business, never having any understanding of what invoicing or what payroll might look like, or how to structure any of the SEO or website development project versus, retainer based. We had no idea what we were doing. And it showed a little bit in the beginning. It certainly showed. But what I did notice was there were a lot of business owners who were willing to take a shot on us because we were certainly cost effective, and we had demonstrated really strong SEO prowess with the other 3 sites that we had built. I'm actually very proud of this, although it was very, it's just 10 years ago now. We were outranking Walmart and Toys R Us for bikes and women's bikes and kids' bikes. There was no real Amazon at the time. But part of the reason why, and one of the little things I love to share, is one of our methodologies. Anybody who's writing this down, write it down, because it's a good one for SEO. It still works, which is get long tail keywords. So we didn't ever try to compete for the word bike or bicycle because it was just too general. But if we did try to compete for women's bicycle, women's comfort bicycle, child's bike with training wheels, the longer the keyword, 2 things happen. 1, there's less competition. And 2, people are closer to the moment of acquisition. So those sales actually happen a lot faster. So once we started implementing those principles to our own businesses and then to these new businesses, I turned to my husband and I said, this is how we're going to get out of this mess. We're going to start this business and we're going to start helping other business owners transition from, not that there's anything wrong with traditional media because I love it, but there is a space for quantifiable marketing. And that's what happens inside of digital. So I did have my second boy and we did launch this company, and my husband had gotten a second job where he was working, not a second job in that he was let go of the first job and then he had gotten another job back in hospitality. And our first client was the country club that he was working for. And then subsequently, it was a great little market to have. We were, I had pitched to a bunch of people who were members at the club. So they were less impacted, most of them were anyway, less impacted by the recession of 2009. So it's a little bit of a crazy story that there's a pregnancy and there's 2 job losses and unemployment and starting a business and everybody in your neighborhood. So it's kind of a crazy story, but we've been in business ever since, and we've been able to grow and help other businesses do the same thing. So it's kind of a fun story. So the GoBeyond story is a little more exciting than the Creative Clarity. Creative Clarity was really just, we saw a hole in the market and started to pursue it and help other business owners and stuff like that. So less exciting opening story, I guess.
So how did you know how to do the SEO stuff?
Oh, that's so fun because we didn't. So I'm sure you're familiar with the let me Google that for you. Yeah, that's pretty much how we learned, because both my husband and I had marketing acumen. I had some marketing education as an undergrad. So we knew the basic principles. And I think that's where people get a little tripped up when it comes to digital marketing, is they forget that it really does come down to the fundamentals. But we literally Googled how to SEO, like how to do search engine optimization, how to do on-page SEO. And we also got some training from something called, and I don't think it exists anymore. They've gone on to do other wonderful, fabulous things, but there was a company in a class that we took called Niche Blueprint. And that was one of the things that got us started. They actually, I think we're here in North Carolina. I believe they're in Raleigh. And we took their course, their online course, and learned how to do it. So it was my husband and I and my brother-in-law also, my husband's brother also founded the company. We're all living at this house and we all took on different roles. So, and still had jobs and kids and things to kind of figure out. But that's how we learned, was actually learning how to do it on Google. Google can pretty much teach you how to do anything. You just have to dig in and you have to find the pieces that actually make sense and test what works and what doesn't and stuff like that. So yeah, we learned how to do SEO through Google, strangely. YouTube, really, more than anything else.
So there are 2 doors that I really want to go down. One is I want to get a little bit tactical, and I want to talk about the long tail keywords, because I feel like that there's a lot of confusion there. But first, I want to talk about what it was actually like for you as a human being going through and living that story, because it's easy to talk about it now when it's like, okay, well, I asked my boss to let me go. I
Mm-hmm.
had a kid on the way. I had another kid, and I say that very lovingly, by the way. And so we have this trouble with, like, there's this income that's like, we have $3,000 here, but that's not going to cover, like, that's just not going to do the,
It's not enough.
it's not enough. And then we just start doing this thing and like hoping for the best. But in the meantime, there are very real bills to pay with very real children who need to be cared for. Like, what was that actually like to go through as a person? Like what were those feelings? What was that like? I mean, what did you wake up every day and think?
Okay, so there were several things that happened around that time. So the market crashed, I think it was October of 2008. It's funny how these things become indelible in your brain. And it didn't really impact us from a stock market perspective, but it certainly impacted my clients. So the handwriting on the wall was there when I was at CBS. Now, keep in mind, we had just moved. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. So we had just moved here a year earlier. My older son was 2, and we had just purchased our house at the height of the market. You know, that was good times right there too. So we closed in February of 2008, and then literally the floor came out from under us a few months later. And when we first moved here, my husband didn't have a job. We came for my job because the CBS, a few other places had offered me a job. I was a pretty good salesperson. So when we came here, we were pretty much bought the house on my salary, which is fine. I mean, we're a partnership. It was cool. The first time my husband had not worked in his entire life from the time he was about 14. So he was with Jake, my older son, for a little while. And then he had gotten a job. So, but he was new salesperson, didn't have a great list. So a lot of the income was coming from me. And then I could see the handwriting. My boss was fired. Another boss was fired. And people are like, they're leaving like rats from a burning building kind of a thing. And I'm pregnant. I found out in October, the same month, I found out I was pregnant. It's just crazy. So there's a picture of me sitting on my couch at Christmas watching my older son open his Christmas gifts. And I had some family in town. And there's tears in my eyes. I'm wearing my eyeglasses because I'm blind as a bat. I'm leaning on my hand like this. And it's Christmas morning. So I'm in my pajamas. And I can remember my parents weren't visiting that time, but I remember it was a couple of days later, I called my dad. And to put things in perspective, my dad's a retired New York cop. So he's not warm and fuzzy. He's not the super, like, I'm going to give you big hugs and all this kind of stuff, but he's extremely pragmatic. And I'm a very independent person, but I was coming unglued. I didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know what was going to happen. GoBeyond was still not GoBeyond yet. It was still like, we got this little bit of cash coming in. And I remember I called him, and I mean, sobbing, like, I'm having this other baby. I don't know what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to get fired. And he was the one that pointed out that most companies don't fire salespeople, which is true. But I didn't think of it. And I'm sobbing and sobbing, sobbing. And what's crazy is that I remember that he was supporting, I think, only one of my 2 sisters, but they were financially tapped, helping out my sister too, because they were also in a very precarious. And I was like, there's no way I can, and I didn't ask, but I didn't know what to do. So I remember hatching a plan and I looked into how much my unemployment would be versus how much I was actually yielding at that point at CBS, and then reached out to my boss and found out that my unemployment would actually be higher. I could pull Jake from childcare, stop with my dry cleaning, and actually make more than what I'm now yielding without any chargeback. So then it's pedal to the metal. I was like, okay, I'm like, if we have this mortgage that we have to hit, and of course, the house is now not even valued where it was just 8 months earlier. It had already kind of tanked a bit. I will admit that it was not only terrifying, but there's the emotions of being pregnant and just the emotions of bringing in another person that you're responsible for. And no health insurance too. So like health insurance is, I don't need to go off on that, but health insurance was a bit of a trick too, because now we don't have any more. So we're going to have a baby on Cobra. Oh my gosh, it was nuts. So it was very much a do or die. Like, we either do this or we sell the house and we move back in with somebody's parents. And to put things in perspective, at the time I was 34. I'm 44 now, so I was 34 at the time. So this isn't like I'm 18 and it didn't work out. Like you don't move back in with your parents, but sometimes you have to. We were very close. So once we got a couple of the clients to pay, like actual paying clients, we weren't just hooking people up, which we liked doing, but we saw the opportunity to do that, and we had our own mouths to feed. Once we started getting people to pay, I got enough to put Jake back into childcare, and I got some coverage for Connor, my younger son. And for a couple of hours a day, I'd go out and network like a crazy person. Because even then, digital marketing wasn't enough to get us started. Even though we were a digital marketing firm, I needed some face-to-face, I needed some immediate action. And it's amazing. It's a testament to my marriage too, because starting a company with your spouse is challenging. You really need very clearly defined lines of who's in charge of what. And you also need to give one another the space to just have a crappy day, to just have it be awful, because you wake up in the morning, like, did you check your email? As soon as you start bleeding into those private moments is when the business becomes more important than the marriage. And sometimes that works for people. It would not have worked for us. So in addition to him working his full-time job and doing some of this stuff at night, and me with the little guys, the babies, and networking and being out and trying to, and I realize that you don't have children and you're not a woman, but trying not to, knowing that you need to go home and nurse, and the stress that comes around with knowing you have to go home and nurse, and the physical stress that comes along with that, and trying to network and be this professional woman. I cannot describe to you the accommodations that needed to happen during that time. But I will admit it did strengthen the case though. Every time I've told those stories to people face to face who are looking into entrepreneurship, they're either absolutely terrified and you go running, screaming like you're a crazy person, or they're very motivated. Like, if you can get over that, then we can do this. And so there were definitely some crazy moments that happened, huge mistakes that we made, and wildly wonderful lessons that we learned too, that I feel very confident even mentoring younger entrepreneurs and give them, like, here's some real world advice as to what you can do. And not because I learned it in a book, that's for sure. I learned plenty in a book, so it's not that. So I hope that gives you some perspective on the realness of it. It got really real. Yeah, especially with kids, it's certainly complicated matters. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it did. You mentioned how there were some big mistakes that y'all made.
Oh yeah.
And there were some really tremendous lessons that you learned.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with the mistakes, and then let's dive into those lessons afterwards.
Okay, so I would say that early on, hands down, the most glaring mistake that I made was, and I'll be very transparent with you, was a measure of tremendous hubris. So I had made a mistake, a relatively small mistake, in that we had two clients at the time, one of which was through someone we knew at the club where Brian worked, my husband. And we had another client that we, was like from the neighborhood. So the price differential was about $800 difference. I think one was about $300, one was $1,100. And this is the only income that we really have from the business. And not being the financial wizard or really even knowing how to use QuickBooks or invoicing systems or anything like that, I sent the wrong invoice to the bigger client. So they paid the $300 when really I needed the $1,100, and we needed it. It was not just like, oh, whoopsies, like we were a big, company. Oh, we'll just catch it next month. Like, we needed the cash at the time. So I reach out to the company. Now, keep in mind, the owner of the company is a big company. Owner of the company is a member at the club. And I reach out to the accounts payable. There's a young lady there. And I said, listen, I messed up. Is it possible? She's like, oh, just send me the new invoice. I'll correct it. No problem. Lickety split. And she says, I could come by once a month and help you reconcile your books. I'm like, I only have two companies. Like, I mean, that's it. She goes, no, but I can help make sure that, you do have software that you're paying for, right? And I said, that's true. And she's like, you want those processes in place now. I said, you're right, I do. So I agreed. I said, yeah. She's like, I can just come to your house once a month. I said, okay. She's like, it'll be really quick. I said, well, how much do you charge? I know that most bookkeepers are like $40, $50 an hour. I don't have that kind of cash. She's like, $10 an hour. It was less than a babysitter. So I'm like, done. Sounds great. So she comes once a month, and turns out she's about almost to the day 2 months older than I am. And she's telling me her story. She's got an issue with a sister who's infirmed in some way, and she's got a kid, and she's got troubles with the child's father, and she's got all these other personal issues, and I feel bad for her. She's struggling with her weight and her health, and she's smoking cigarettes and all these other kinds of things. Just fine. Those are all choices of her own. But I definitely got the sense that she was like seeking advice. So in my attempt to help her, I was kind of, chatting away and saying, well, you should do this, and maybe you should do that. And, why don't you quit the smoking if you're struggling with cash? I was like, it's an expensive habit. It's not good for you. It's not going to help you lose weight, which was clearly something that was bothering her. And in my naivete, she started to say, well, that this company, they use another bigger marketing firm. Do you want me to show you their invoice and what they're doing? And I'm like, no, I'm good. We'll get it on our own. Thanks, though. And then she's like, well, I can show you what they're doing. I bet I can put a good word in. So I'm like, all right, this feels off. But, I'm good. I think we're good. Thanks very much. So fast forward about a month and a half later, I'm having coffee with a new colleague. Her name's Nisha. And she is a CPA here in town, great CPA. And she's not really lamenting, but it's right before April. So she's in her busy time, and she's like, oh, I need another bookkeeper, blah, blah. I was like, it's funny. I just hired this bookkeeper. She's really inexpensive. Maybe she can help you out. She only does a little bit of work for me. And she goes, sure. So I say her name, and she goes, what's her name? So I say her name again, and she says, hold, please. She picks up the phone, makes a phone call, only to find out that she had to do some forensic work for a previous client because this woman had stolen $80,000 from a previous client of hers. Happenstance, had never met the woman Nisha before, and she was the one that tells me about this. She goes, you might want to let her go. Oh my God, might want to let her go. Yeah, I'm going to let her go. I have nothing for her to steal at this point, but my client does. So now I'm like, what do I do? Like, she's so willing to share this information with me. This guy is a member at the club where my husband works. So now I'm freaking out. Like, what if he thinks I'm in on it? And what if he thinks my husband's in on it? He'll lose his job. I cannot describe to you. I'm getting shaky just thinking about it now. Cannot describe to you the level it absolutely overwhelming. So I remember turning to Brian. Brian's freaking out, understandably. And here I am in my hubris thinking I'm helping this woman out. I'm hooking her up. I'm going to give her life skills, right? Oh, God. I'm getting snowed like there's no tomorrow. So I reach out to my client and I say, I need to meet you, and I need to meet you outside of the office. Like, we can't meet at your place. We have to meet in an independent place. So he actually thought I was complaining because I had a little bit of his point person inside, I don't really think enjoyed me. And so I thought that he thought I was going to complain about a personality issue, when I'm like, no, man, I wouldn't ask you to step outside for that. I would have just handled it with the point person. So when I told him, he got very nervous and looked into it. And she had, in fact, taken a couple $100,000 from him. And to my knowledge, she is still in jail. So yeah, so here's the mistake and the lesson, if you want, was I didn't do the research on her that I should have. I made the assumption that because she was with a company as big as she was with, that there was a background check on her. And there was a background check on her. But that background check happened prior to the other company charging her with theft and whatnot. So she kind of slipped in under the wire. So lesson number one, do your own diligence. Don't trust anybody else's diligence. Do your own research. And then when you do background checks on your staff, check again in 6 months, because you don't know what may have happened in that time period. So that's lesson number one. Lesson number two, don't necessarily come to the table thinking that not that you shouldn't help people, but that when somebody brings to you a tale of woe, ask yourself, what's the reason why they're sharing this with you? What's the outcome that they're looking for? Are they really just looking to share something with you, or are they looking to get something from you? And so those were some pretty big stories and some pretty big lessons. And I think we were in business maybe a year at that point, not even. So it was very, very early on. And that was a huge, wildly embarrassing mistake, but it's part of our story now. So it is what it is. So I hope that answers your question.
I have never heard a story like that before.
So it was a story, that's for sure.
That is incredible. What's incredible is how that all kind of tied back together and how you figured it all out at the end of the day.
I got very lucky.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, it was very wild. It was very wild. I'm indebted to Nisha on a regular basis. And when I do run into her and we meet new people, they're like, hey, Trish, why don't you tell a story about how we met? I'm like, happy to do it. And so she was definitely worth the cup of coffee, that's for sure.
Wow. So, okay, so we talked about some of the mistakes.
Yep.
Let's talk about we talked a little bit about the lessons, but I want to drill down into those lessons. What are some of the most impactful things that you've learned thus far on your journey?
Okay. So one of the biggest lessons that I've learned, I'm actually in the process of turning into a course, but is making sure that the people that you take on to provide a service for are a good fit, that you can absolutely deliver. If it's not a win, it's a loss. And I know that as entrepreneurs, and man, do I know this all too well, how it's critical for us to just take on new clients because you need the revenue. Sales cures all ills. But the truth is that it doesn't. That's not an accurate statement, because you can sell to someone and it's not a good fit, or you're not really giving them what they need, but you're trying really hard and you're altering your internal processes for this one client. And it can actually turn your profitability on its head. It can turn your ability to take on, meaning your capacity, turn that on its head, because you have clients that are unhappy for some reason and you're trying to fix it, but you don't have the process to fix it. It's like you're showing up to fix something when you need a power drill and all you have is a hammer. Like you're trying your best and you have a tool and you're really excited about your tool and you're really good at using your tool, but it's not the right tool. And all of the earnestness and all of the thank you notes and all of the friendly relationship that you have will not correct something when you are taking on a client that is a poor fit for your service. Now, clearly, there are lots of entrepreneurs who have products and other things like that. And maybe that lesson might not work as well. But what I will say is make sure that you're very familiar with who your market is and how your product or service is actually a benefit to them. Make sure your head's right. Because if you come to the table like, I just want to sell, then you must be selling on the short term. You are not looking to have a long-term relationship, because if it's not a fit, it's not going to become a fit. So that was one of the bigger lessons, I would say, over the 10 years that I've learned, that to make sure that you find, and again, not everything's going to be a perfect fit, but just make sure that it fits, either that you can deliver well and that they can have a positive experience interacting with your brand. Outside of that, you're asking for more trouble, despite how much money they bring to the table. So that was a big lesson that I learned.
That is such a good point. And I've run an agency before. That was the first business that I started, was a marketing agency. And one of the biggest mistakes that I made was trying to expand my service offering and not being able to fully deliver on that. And I didn't charge people for something that I couldn't deliver. I just didn't charge them because I wasn't confident that I could deliver. Therefore, I started getting a bunch of clients at $0 in revenue, which is not a very sustainable model if you're trying to build a business. And what I realized was, it's better to be really, really, really good at one tiny little thing than to be okay at a lot of things. You know,
I think Bruce Lee said that. Bruce Lee said, I don't fear the man who knows 10,000 kicks. I fear the man who's practiced one kick 10,000 times. And I think that's exactly to your point. I think that's exactly what you're saying there. So,
oh
so
yeah.
you there and Bruce Lee, who's like the master. So you guys, great minds, I guess.
Well, I probably heard something he said because you know I like to read a lot, so it's probably definitely from him.
Yeah.
But it's true because you know I started off doing social media management, and I broke it down as simply as possible, and I said I will post 2 times per week on one platform for $400. That's it. That's all I'm doing.
Yep.
Because you can, like, I could promise that would happen. Like, for sure, without a doubt, that could happen. And it did happen every single time. And like, look, I was 20 years old when I started my first business. I didn't really know what I was doing, but because that was a very specific thing and I had clarity, it worked. And like you can make a lot of money selling that one thing.
Yeah.
And here's and here's one other thing that I would like to say that I'd like to offer, and you know, in that same vein, and then I want to, of course, get back to your story and your knowledge. But if you don't feel comfortable deploying the service, find a technician who can.
Yep.
Work with them and share the revenues with them. And make it so that you can go and you can sell. If you're more of the salesperson, you can go sell, and then you can hand off the actual like execution of the work, hand that off to the technician and give them 30%, 40%, 50% of the job, you know, whatever works for your business model. You have to think about that for yourself, but sell and hand off, because that way the bottleneck's not on you and you can go make more deals and get more business. So those are the two things I learned.
I completely agree with you. I think you're dead on. And I think that strategic partnerships with, you know, to you said, get a technician or get somebody that can do it. We've actually been on the opposite side where we are the technician because of our expertise in SEO and pay-per-click in particular, where other agencies that really do offer, when I say full service, I mean everything from broadcast to pens with your name on it. Like they literally offer everything. And part of it is because they don't keep everybody in house, but they have specialists. So exactly, dead on, completely agree with that assessment. You're spot on there.
So let's keep going in your narrative. At what point did you really feel like, okay, making some money, I know what I'm doing, I can breathe a little bit, like I'm starting to really feel confident, and this is a real business? At what point did you have that sigh of relief?
August of 2012. So I can remember it was Brian's last day. He quit, and we took a couple of weeks vacation, and it was back to business as usual. And it was really crazy to have both of us home, and one of the kids Jake was in school, and then Connor was in more, not all day childcare, but you know, part of the day childcare. And it was really interesting. I remember his last day was August 3rd, and it, like, just surreal. He was so cute. He came home and he put his necktie around his head, like almost like a bandana, like it's hanging down. And he's playing. He's a percussionist, so he had his cajon, which is a box drum, and he's outside with his corporate noose, as he put it, around his neck, around his forehead rather, and he's banging on the bongos. And it was a very I have a picture of him with the boys later that day when I told them that Daddy was going to be home now. So that was really huge, because I mean, his hours, if for those people who are in hospitality, they know this all too well. You know, it's a 16-hour, you know, or we called it the 8-hour half day. It's a 16-hour full work day. They're very, very long hours. And even in management, sometimes, especially in management, they are very long hours. So the fact that he was going to be home and we could flex our world around it a little bit was really awesome. So I knew at that point it was terrifying because the consistent income was going away, but we did have enough of a consistent lead flow at that point. We had some ongoing clients. Most of our clients pay in advance, a month in advance. So we knew if they were going away, we knew we had a little bit of padding there. So I knew that it was terrifying, but also this is good enough that we can launch this and actually really be, this is our primary income. So, and it was, and in many ways still is. So yeah, so that was, I know I throw out dates, but it's true. So that was awesome. It was really a fun time. So that was good.
What levers did y'all pull that were the most impactful in getting to that point?
Again, knowing which clients to take on and which ones not to, learning how to price appropriately. That was another thing that was huge, because we also started reading a lot of books, not unlike you, as to what kind of a markup was appropriate. And my knee jerk was, well, it's funny, my husband's knee jerk was significantly lower. I made like, I remember this ruling that I made. I was like, nobody's allowed to price anything. You got to leave it to me. And part of it was because in sales, there's an element of, you know what it's worth, you know what you can get for it, and somewhere in the middle is what you charge. And one of the earlier mistakes we made was undercharging. We were undercharging everything, and then we're wondering why we're still kind of running in place and not really getting anywhere. So changing the pricing model was a huge lever to pull. And one of the ways to do that wasn't just bump your prices, but rather improve the conversation around the value of what we were doing. Like, I'm not just serving you SEO, and at the time, let's say it was $500 a month or something like that. So you're paying me $500 and I'm going to do this magical stuff in the background. That's not the conversation. The conversation is, we're going to put you in a position where you are ahead of your competitors in a space when they're actively looking for you. Now, how much is that worth to you? And all of a sudden, very different animal. So a lot of times people make the mistake of thinking that value comes in cheap. Cheap is not value, unless the value is cheap. If that's the case, fine. But if you're investing in your business and you are really looking for the lowest common denominator, make no mistake, you will output the lowest common denominator too. And that's great. There are companies that are built on getting things for a low price. But if you're trying to invest in your business and you really want to compete in that space, you have to invest. And we were not the most expensive by a long shot, but we certainly were not operating from the place of cheap. So changing the conversation around the value of what we offered and the customization around what we offered was one of the other levers that we pulled. So it was partly changing the conversation and partly pricing appropriately and making those things. And then I would say like the third lever was our contracts and making sure that our contracts were very clear and favorable to both parties. Many people say, well, I want cancel anytime. Like, well, we don't have that. And then others in our industry do 12-month contracts. I'm like, man, the last thing I want to do is move forward with somebody, and then by month 4, they hate us, and then we're going to lock them in for the next 8 months. If you want to break up with me, no problem. If it's, we can break up. I need, out of courtesy, 30 days notice. I need 30 days. And what that helps us do is unhook those different things. We're aware that there's going to be a dip. So what changes do we need to make internally to bring that revenue up? Stuff like that. It also makes the client, it lowers the barrier to entry for them to actually acquiesce and purchase from us. So most of SEO and pay-per-click, fortunately for us, is not subjective. Creative work can be very subjective. Social media can be very subjective. So it's like, well, you did it, but you didn't do it. And then there's like this nebulous, did you abide by the contract? For us, having contracts, 30 days notice, being very clear, that was really another lever that really helped lower the barrier to entry. And then we could, position ourselves as easy to work with. So it was one of our positioning points. So those things helped quite a bit.
So from when Brian was able to be home until now, what were some of those highlights?
From the time Brian was able to be home to now, we've had a couple of things. So we did a few crazy things. We did have a more full staff, people who were actual W-2 employees. And we realized we didn't really enjoy that as much. And I love the staff members, even though a couple of them don't work for us anymore. We had very positive relationships with them overall, but creating a corporate culture, there's a science to that. And having such a virtual business where there was a lot of come and go as you please because work can get done at home, creating that environment actually was easier digitally than I expected it to be. Having everybody kind of go to a central office, I think we needed more people for it to feel like a true corporate culture. So that was both a highlight and kind of a downgrade too, because we loved the office. We had a phenomenal view. We were in a very cool part of town. Like we had all the bells and whistles, and yet it's not necessarily the alchemy you need for it to actually function as a true corporate culture. A couple of the other things that I've really enjoyed is the flexibility of him being available. So he's a big golfer. He loves to golf. So he's, as a matter of fact, as we speak, golfing because all of his work is done, and he's had that ability to, to kind of go and do what he wants. And so can I when I want to, unless work needs to be done. So I really enjoy that flexibility as well. And this is kind of a strike and a gutter, I guess, but taking vacations is always a bit of a trick as well, because we're the owners of the company, because we're the front person. If we take extended vacations, we need to leave it in the trusted hands of other people in our company, which I don't think we've ever really had a problem. But and usually we take it when we know that there'll be, because there's an element of seasonality to our company. Just here, and for some reason, the city of Charlotte shuts down in the month of July. Everybody goes to the beach. So most of our work actually can kind of be on autopilot, because SEO, there's certain softwares you can kind of plug in and it does what it's supposed to do. And then you kind of come back and check on it. So having that flexibility. And then one of the other kind of weird things that we did with him being home was I homeschooled my boys for 3 years. So that was a mixed bag. I think all told for them, it was positive. For the company, not so much, because it couldn't sell as, I didn't realize how much time it was going to take. So it was great to have him here, but it also kind of complicated matters from a homeschooling perspective. So they are now, and they're happy about it, but they're now back at regular school, stuff like that. So those are a couple of the experiments, I guess you could say, that we tried during the time that after he left the club.
So what does the future hold for you?
That's a good question. A couple of things are afoot. We have toyed with the idea of actually selling our company. We've been approached by a few firms, some of which we really never took seriously. A couple of other firms have thought about, hey, maybe we should look into purchasing them. But we're very careful about that. We want to be very careful about, if we are purchased, will our clients be taken care of? Because most of our clients, it is a relationship sale. So we're close with a lot of our clients. So we want to make sure that they're taken care of. And also, there's a part of me that doesn't want to let it go too. So, we kind of go back and forth. It's nice to kind of play around with valuations and seeing where we're valued and stuff like that. And then the other things that we have going on is both Brian and I have some pet projects that are tied to marketing, different directions, but tied to marketing. And we're both creating courses. I alluded to mine earlier, where it's a course that teaches you how to attract and retain the right kinds of clients for you. And then there's also a component to how to offload clients that are diminishing your capacity and your mental well-being and stuff like that. So, and yeah, so that's the plan for the future. If we don't sell, which there's a strong possibility that we will not, but if we choose not to sell, then I feel that we may take on some more staff members so that Brian and I can focus on those other projects and have people that kind of suit the role that I'm in and that Brian's in right now. So, yeah.
What do you want to leave behind as your legacy?
I think the other course is what I'd like to leave behind. I really would love, I genuinely believe that entrepreneurship can be an absolute magical way to run your life. You can call the shots, and there's just and again, it's not a fit for everybody, but one of the biggest drawbacks is not knowing how to manage your pipeline appropriately. And I don't mean just filling the funnel appropriately. I mean, you could fill your gas tank with oil and it will destroy your car. And it's not because oil doesn't belong in the car, it just doesn't belong there. So I'm a firm believer that, sure, if you're a startup, take what you can get some scratch going, I get it. But if you've been in business for a little while and you continue to take on clients that are those nightmares, the ones that I bet you any entrepreneur that's listening right now knows exactly who I'm talking about. They can probably picture the one that like drives them bananas. And they drive them bananas, one, because they're a poor fit for what you do, or it's not been communicated to them appropriately. There's no actual template process, acquisition process to filter out appropriate fit. There is for some companies, but there are a lot of smaller businesses that don't do that appropriately. And it costs them money, it costs them time, it costs them mental well-being. Everybody likes to do a good job. Everybody wants to do the right thing. So it gets very frustrating if you're with a client that they just not quite there. It's not really working. And it drains on the entrepreneur. They start to question their own abilities. And I feel like if they had a template and an ability to actually show this is the process you should do to get to a place where the clients that you have are all your wins, they're all good for you. And then the few that don't quite fit, you can give them a soft landing someplace else and then you part friends. That's the ideal. So I really think that my legacy will be how to connect people with the right clients, get more clients they love, and enjoy their chosen career, their entrepreneurship again. And that's what I want to do, is connect people so that they really have a heartfelt connection wherever possible with their clients and enjoy their career again, their chosen career again. So that's the one I would like to leave.
One of the things that it seems like has been one of the themes, one of the golden threads throughout your story is the relationship. The relationship with your clients, the relationship between you and your husband, and between that you and the bookkeeper who turned out to be not who you thought she was. And I really do believe that connection is a foundation of humanity. And I really don't say that lightly. I truly believe that. So,
I agree with you.
So I'm interested in learning, what is your philosophy on developing deep, meaningful, and genuine connections with other people?
I have a couple of theories on that. And this word gets thrown around a little bit, which is ironic given its meaning, but authenticity. You have to just come to the table and be who you are, where you are in that moment. Being authentic is it's absolutely critical. With that said, there comes a caveat though, that coming to the table and being authentic does not necessarily mean always being right, thinking that you're always right, or even saying something when you're correcting another person. Sometimes being right is wrong. And what I mean by that is, if there's somebody that's coming to the table and really all they need you to do is believe in them, even if you kind of don't, they just might need, it might be Dumbo's, little feather. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Dumbo Makes Me Cry. I could cry thinking about it now. But he needed to believe that he could fly and he thought the feather was magic. And sometimes you just kind of being that support for somebody can be their feather. And even if in your heart of hearts you don't necessarily believe it, you pull for them anyway. And I think that as far as being a business owner, I had a conversation literally just today with a law firm, and she came to me with her budget and she wants to do all these different things. I said, okay, first and foremost, you're female-owned business, look into NABO, National Association of Women Business Owners. Before you pay me, look into that, because your budget isn't that strong. And I said, that's okay, but let's take a look at what you need and then really cherry pick what's the most appropriate, even if it isn't a service you provide. That goes so much further than trying to kind of do the snatch and grab that is short game. And as far as relationships in life and in general, the key to positive relationships are boundaries and authenticity. It's really it. You got to be really who you are, but also define those boundaries. Recognize you come to the table with flaws and that they will too. And that respect theirs and define yours. And I really think that those are key. Boundary is not a bad word. It's a good word. Good fences make good neighbors. good non-disclosure agreements make good strategic partners, and good boundaries make good relationships. They just do.
How do you assess depth of character?
Ooh, great question. Being a bartender for a long time. I was a bartender for 10 years in New York, and you learn a lot about character. But character is one of those things that slips out when people aren't looking. There's a lot to be said for the polished appearance versus the real thing. And I'm always interested to watch the way, I love going to meet people in coffee shops, because how they talk to the barista and how they talk to, or how they interact really with anybody. Now, maybe they're an introvert, so they don't engage at a deep level with the barista and ask how their mama's doing and stuff like that, like I would. That's fine. But if they don't acknowledge, or they turn it on and off, that's a red flag for me right off the bat. Because what you're then revealing to me is that something that's of value to you is somebody's lot in life, and how you value people is indicative of your character, in my opinion. I also am wildly aware of how do I put this? How people will represent themselves online too. Like I will admit, I definitely narc out. I will, if I'm hiring somebody, or if I will check out your digital footprint. And some people don't have one. Most people that are, I would say, Generation X, millennials, and younger typically have some sort of digital footprint, unless they are like our neighbors on the street or something like that, if they don't have like an actual, because they don't have access to it. But most of the time, there are people within this country that have access to those things on one level or another. And I will research there and then see how do they represent publicly versus how do they represent digitally. And I'm not mad at you if you have a beer. I'm not mad at you if you curse. Not have an interest in you, I can't say how you vote politically, because that does impact. I don't like to be judgy that way, but especially in this political climate, I will admit that does come across for me a little bit. I'll hear them out, but I have some pretty strong views there. But I will research and see if there's alignment too, because what I don't want to do is start engaging with somebody that's going to bring out an ugly thing in me too. Like, I'm not flawless. I don't have, I'm not blind to my own perceptions and judgments too. I try to challenge them, but I find that if I'm going to hire somebody, or they're going to hire me, that having a certain element of alignment keeps things on the up and up, and it doesn't challenge those extremes of character and value and stuff like that. So I hope that makes sense.
It absolutely does. And I think that's a very interesting perspective on it. And I also definitely have to ask, do you actually ask the baristas about their mamas?
It depends on the barista, but I have. Yes, I have. As a matter of fact, I speak Spanish. I know I don't look like I speak Spanish, but I do. And I'm actually connected with a lady from Target, because she's from Costa Rica and she was having trouble. And I ended up chatting with her, and now we're Facebook friends. And that's how I get down. My niece teases me. My niece, Caitlin, who lives in New York. We went to DC one time, and she, not unlike her mother, Kathleen, are introverts. They're just quieter. They're sweet and very funny, but they're just quieter. So we're going in every Uber driver. I'm like, how you doing today? What's going on? Did you have a good day? Did you get anybody good people? People being nice to you? And my niece looks, she's like, Aunt Trish, what is the matter with you? And I'm like, this is just how I get down. This is how I just talk to people. And she was so now every time I see my niece Caitlin, she's like, Aunt Trish, how's your mama? Where's your mama stay at? She's always teasing me about this. So I'm like, I don't know, Caitlin, you want to go out and meet some strangers? Go meet strangers. She goes, I'm not supposed to talk to strangers. I'm like, come on, strangers are friends we haven't met yet. So, we laugh about that. So my 11-year-old niece teases me. So yeah, it's very funny.
That's awesome. When you said, so cool. I'm from New Orleans, and
I love New Orleans, my favorite town.
Mine too, by the way. And when you said that, I pictured you asking him, how's your mom and them? Because that's what people say down here.
That's right. That's right. I was in New Orleans a couple of weeks ago, actually. I've been there countless times. I don't even know how many times, but that is that is kind of part of where it comes from. It's like, how's your mom and them?
Mm-hmm.
Sit down for a spell. Yeah.
How's your mom and them? And then I say this all the time because my dad says it, but my dad always asks, "How you darn? How you darn?"
How you darn? That's great. That's great. Yeah, back where I'm from, it's how you doing. So it's very different because I'm from New York.
Mm-hmm.
So it's much more. There's not a lot of mama up there. It's ma. So
that's like Joey Tribbiani from Friends.
It's exactly like Joey.
How you doing?
So funny. How you doing? It's very Joey and that's why it was so funny because that is a lot how my peeps back home. That's how we sound. So.
So let's change gears a little bit.
Let's do it.
What's your greatest theory?
My greatest theory. You mean not the theory of relativity, right? I have a few theories on lots of different things, but I think I have a weird theory about people that if people aren't heard, the story gets louder and more embellished if they don't feel heard. So a lot of times, like if you watch children and adults do this, if they're telling you a story, and you know how the story of the fish story, how it grows and grows and grows. I do believe that if you actually listen and value the fish when it's this size, that it doesn't necessarily get bigger. People are constantly fishing for validation. So if for some reason the guppy is not giving them validation, then all of a sudden it's not a guppy anymore. Maybe it jumps to a shark or something like that. So I feel that we all need connection, to your point, and validation. So we seek it even if it's false. We are so ingrained in needing it that we'll actually embellish to try to get some validation. So given that, and that I find that in extreme behaviors too, people who pop off, like say you're in a bar and somebody's, filled with all kinds of gravitas and stuff like that. It's because they're not feeling valid. They feel self-conscious, or they need to present bigger than they are because they're not getting validation. So firm believer that that's like people and how they feel that validation, like I said. And as far as theories in business, you're much better off losing business for the truth than keeping it for a lie, because it just finds its way. It finds its way always. So if you're wrong, own it right away. And ideally bring a solution when possible. Don't just be like, we screwed everything up, and show up. Own it, but bring a solution. I don't care if you're somebody who's maybe listening or watching this right now, and maybe you don't own a business, maybe you just have a boss. Own it. If you made a mistake, or you have a mistake, or you have some kind of problem, bring them some sort of a solution. Say, here, even if they say, that's crazy, I don't want to do that. No problem. But at least you didn't come to the table empty-handed. So try to be a part of the solution. I guess globally you can say that too, but try to be part of the solution. And I would say that off the top of my head, those are the theories that I would subscribe to of late. I could probably think of more when I'm falling asleep later tonight. But of late, that's where I am right now.
I would also like to add, even if you think that the problem may develop because of this thing and you just feel weird about it, I promise you it's better to address it now, because it may be a little tiny, just like the fish thing. It could be a little thing now that you're like, I don't know if this is going to turn into something or if it's going to be a problem. Address it then, and it won't have to be a problem. Because if you just let it grow and grow and grow and grow and grow, the problems that compound on each other and take a long time to develop are the hardest problems to solve. Because
you're totally right.
If it takes a long time to develop, everybody's going to be looking for that quick solution, but there is none. Spoiler alert. It takes a long time to develop the solution. It's a structural problem. So solve it before it happens. That's
really well put.
That's what I would say there.
Yeah.
So Trish, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. I have one more question for you.
Hit me.
Maybe two. I reserve that right. Okay. What question should I be asking you that I just wouldn't think to ask?
Give me a moment on that. One of the things that I would say is, or questions I would ask other entrepreneurs is, who are the biggest contributors? Who else is in this? You talk a lot about connection and relationships, and you've obviously reflected that that's something that is clearly a theme in my own life. I'd be very remiss to not say that to think that this was something I did on my own. And I have an impact and I have a strong personality, and I am not diminishing myself in any way, but I'd be remiss if I said that this was something that was a solo. Even if you're the sole business owner, it's never just about you. There's always people who contributed, either coworkers or family members, or even clients that took a shot on, a startup or a new company. There's always people in your story, positive and even negative, like the bookkeeper. I do wish her well. I don't know why she got so lost, and I'm not even angry at her. She taught me a wildly valuable lesson, and I hope that maybe spending some time incarcerated teaches her one too. So I said, to answer your question, I would say, who else on your journey made this story the story that it is? Now, clearly I've referenced my children, my husband, but I think that most entrepreneurs would be more than happy and humbled by shining a light on the other people who were a part of helping them get to where they are now. There you go.
What advice do I need to hear from you?
Well, I would be more inclined to give marketing advice, despite the fact that you were an entrepreneur. First, I'd compliment you on what you've already achieved. I think it's remarkable, truly. You've forged your own path, and I respect that. I wish more people would. It's so much better that way. I heard a friend of mine say once that the beaten path is for beaten men. Always makes me laugh when I hear that. And forging your own is great. My advice to you specifically would be to continue to do what you're doing. And if you are going to diversify your offerings and you're going to learn new things, make sure that you continue to keep those trusted advisors around you. And the bigger you get and the more famous you become, and the more of an audience that you curate, there comes a danger of having lots of what they call yes men, or women, as it were. And people will tell you that, oh yeah, this is totally great, and not actually give you sound advice because you've reached a threshold in your life and they just kind of want to be close to the flame, as opposed to recognizing that the flame is about to burn out. So make sure that you keep those people around you who are not going to BS you, that are going to give you, even if you don't necessarily take their advice, it'll give you pause. So anybody who puts themselves in a public forum, especially at the level that you're going for, have achieved, and are shooting for, make sure you surround yourself with people who are not going to just say yes so that they can get a piece of what you've created. So specific advice to you, that's what I would offer.
Thank you very, very much, Trish. I really do appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing this time with me. It's been very special and very meaningful. So thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for having me. This was awesome for me too. So I appreciate it. I'm very humbled to be on the show. So thank you.
Absolutely. And to everybody who's watching, listening, I want to thank y'all very, very much from the bottom of my heart. I want to ask y'all, how you darn? I'd love to know. And I wish your mom and them well as well. So that really though, thank you very much for being a part of the show, supporting the show, supporting me. Y'all are the reason that I do this. I love you very much, and I will see you on the next episode.